Good day, everyone. Neophyte DAG bringing you another message. And this is a very special message because it talks about the new year of the house of Jacob, the house of Israel, the house of Lewis, the children of Jacob, the children of Israel, the children of Lewis. This is your new year. This is one of your new year. This is the lunar new year that we're going to talk about. And I have some very exciting and interesting information for you. In this message, I'm also going to talk about the feast days and the Passover. Before we get into this message, there are a few things I want to make clear. I want to bring your attention to Genesis 1, verse 14, where it talks about God, the Netta, Allah, the Most High, creating the lights in the heaven to separate day from night and for us to use as signs, seasons, days, and years. And the reason why this is important is if you tie your days, your years, your season, and your time into the lights in the heaven, you cannot go wrong. The moon shines at a particular point in time, at a particular brightness, over and over and over. The cycle continues, same as the sun. It rises in the morning, it sets in the evening. So those things are constant. If you rely on them, you cannot go out of place, out of balance. You cannot miss the other signs and the seasons. So it's very important to always go back to Genesis 1 verse 14, days and signs and events ordained by the Most High. You cannot go wrong. If you tie yourself into days designated by man where they have no divine connection to the Most High, you're always going to be off balance. So what I want you to get from this is that you need to tie yourself into these days that are given to you as signs, seasons, and years that are ordained in heaven by the Most High and by the Lord Thoth. We're going to talk about the lunar calendar. There are two calendars that are used by the Egyptians. The Egyptians are our forefathers. We're descendants of the Egyptian. If you're a dark-skinned, brown-skinned race person living in North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, you are a descendant of the Egyptians. You are part of the Semitic people. You're a descendant of the Shem, which are Semitic people, and you were taken from that part of the continent to this continent. You are the Egyptian that I'm going to be talking about in this message. So there are two calendars. One is the lunar, one is the solar. The Egyptians used a purely lunar calendar, and they used that according to this prior to the establishment of a solar civil calendar. That's not entirely accurate, but I won't challenge that in this message. We'll say that for another one. How does the lunar calendar work? On the morning when the waning moon no longer can be seen. So when you can see the moon, any color, any brightness in it, that's when a new day for the moon calendar begins. That's when day one of it. So mark that, keep that in mind. The lunar calendar continued to be used as the liturgical year. Liturgical means it's a Christian year. The Christians took it when Egypt was conquered by Greek, and then Egypt was then conquered by the Romans. They took that and they made it into their own calendar. That's what they call their liturgical year. They borrowed it and copied from it. Let's go on. So let's find out when this new year is. It has to have a starting point. And in the Bible, it tells you when it starts. In Esther 3, verse 7, in the first month, that is the month of Nisan. It's telling you the first month, if we can identify what Nisan is, we're going to find the first month. So now we have to dig in and find what is Nisan. So here we are in Nisan, Hebrew calendar. Hebrew was the language that the Egyptians spoke, the ancient Hebrewic language, not the modern Hebrewic language, which are now spoken by the Jewish people that are of the Caucasian race. But I'm talking about the ancient Hebrew that were of the dark-skinned Egyptians at that particular point in time. It is the first month of their ecclesiastical year and the seventh month of their solar year, which is the civil year. So we can pull two things from it. Nisan, first month on the lunar, and then it's also the seventh month on the solar calendar. Let's read on. In the book of Torah, the Nisan is called the Aviv. It is also called the Abib in the Bible. A translation from the Torah language into the Greek language equates it to Abib. Nisan falls in March to April on the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar is what we're currently using in our modern time. The Gregorian calendar is a calendar that was put in place by a Roman pope. He decided he was going to be a calendar designator, and he designated it for all the places that were under the Roman Catholic rule for them to use the Gregorian calendar. But going back to the Egyptian calendar, it's a lunar calendar. Part of that lunar calendar, it's 30 days. Each month is 30 days. That's when the moon becomes no color, no brightness, to when it becomes fully bright. It happens over a 30-day period. That's why the Egyptians tie themselves into the month by a moon calendar. Man cannot change the moon. So there's no way he can manipulate it. You tie yourself into that. It's a heavenly body. Genesis 1 tells you, I've created the lights in the heavens. For you it shall be for sign, for your days, your weeks, your months, your year, and your equinoxes. So the Egyptians follow the rule of God and tie themselves to a light in the sky, the moon. Same thing with the civil calendar. It's tied into the sun. But which sun? It's our own sun, relationship with the sun of Sirius. Sirius and our sun are twin suns. They move together. So they tie Sirius movement with the movement of our sun to come up with the civil calendar. We'll deal with that on another message. For now, we're going to stay focused on the lunar calendar. This is what a lunar calendar looks like, the way the Egyptians used to use it. And it's called the ecclesiastical month and then the civil month. So a lunar month, a solar month. Nisan again. It's the first month of the lunar, the seventh of the solar. It has 30 days in length. And then on the Gregorian calendar, which is our calendar now, the modern calendar, it falls between March and April. So whenever the moon becomes zero brightness within March to April, that's where that new year begins. Let's find out when is that. Before we do that, we'll take a look at another lunar calendar for more information. First, staying with the word Nisan on the first month. Nisan, if you haven't caught on to it as yet, that's the name the car manufacturer took on. It's an Egyptian name. Nissan, Nissan Altima, Nissan Maxima, Nissan this, Murano, whatever. Yes, they're taking our Egyptian name and naming it as a product. Moving on, the Nisan falls in line with another important day for the house of Israel, the house of Louis, the house of Jacob, the Passover. It's a very important day which the children of Israel, the house of Israel, have been commanded to follow in order to get the blessings that are ordained for them. And we're going to find out some more about that once we started reading through some more. So this is what I want to point out to you. The Lunar New Year is on March 14th. And for me to tell you that, I have to be able to prove it. In proving it, I take you to the lunar calendar from March 2021. And this is in the Farmer's Almanac. following the moon cycle, because we've been armed with the information that Nisan, which is the first month of the Egyptian lunar calendar, falls on a date between March and April in our own modern day calendar. Let's look at that calendar to see when we have a new moon, a new day, where the moon now reaches its no brightness and then it starts to rebright itself. If you trace it all the way through, you will get to March 14th. That's the first day now when the moon begins to start a new 1 month cycle. March 14th, that's the New Year day for the children of Israel that are following the lunar calendar. It's for the children of Israel to celebrate their new beginning, their new year on the 14th and get their blessing. And then for the rest of the year, that blessing stays with you. So March 14th, 2021, that is your true new year when the new moon begins based on the lunar calendar of Nisan that the Egyptians have put in place. And the information has survived all these years and carried down through various sources until now, when you can reclaim your birthright and your blessings. On March 14th is one of the SHEBUOTs. It's the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of First Fruits. That's a day that's ordained by the Most High, by the Lord Thoth, as a day where the blessing will be poured upon the children of Israel, the house of Israel. Let's find out some more about the SHEBUOT, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of First Fruits. To find out more, we'll go to Jubilees, the book of Jubilees. It's a book that's not in your conventional Bible, so I might be calling a name you're not familiar with, but it's part of the original Bible. Now it's in a book that's called the Pseudepigraphas. It's the missing books from the conventional Bible that was taken out. The Pseudepigrapha, these books, the Jubilees and other books of its type, it tells too much in plain language. So they were taken out of the conventional Bible, and the conventional Bible was coded in such a way that you could not pull out the true meanings of things out of it. Now these books, these missing books, are being brought back by the Most High so we can plainly see what was the message intended for the children of Israel at that time. So that's why we'll consult the book of Jubilees so you can find out the true meaning of the lunar and the solar when we do get to the solar and other messages. So in the book of Jubilees, chapter 6, we'll go to verse 21. For it is the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits, and it has two meanings. It's a double meaning to it. And we'll skip over some of that because I want to give you the highlights of the book of Jubilee, chapter 6. In verse 22, the highlight, the children of Israel should remember and celebrate it. So the Feast of First Fruits, it's telling you that the children of Israel, the house of Israel, should remember this day and celebrate it. And let's find out when are those days. We go to 23. And on the new moon of the first month, and on the new moon of the fourth month, and on the new moon of the seventh month, and on the new moon of the 10th month are the days of remembrance, the days of season. So you have to remember those dates. And we just covered the new moon of Nisan, which could be the first month of the lunar calendar or the seventh month of the solar calendar, but it will be covered here. Whichever way you slice it, it's covered here. If you want to put it as a new moon of the first month, covered. If you want to put it as a new moon of the seventh, it's covered in verse 23. So that date, March 14th, it's a day of remembrance. It's not only your new year, it's a date of remembrance. Why do you need to remember it? It was ordained. If you look in verse 24 and verse 28, these days are ordained as a feast for generations forever and ever. It has to be celebrated by our generation, the previous generation, and generation that comes after us. It has to be celebrated, remembered, and ordained. Also in verse 29, to take it a little step further, it was also ordained in heaven. It was placed on heavenly tablets, and it's written in the heavens that these are the days given to the children of Israel, the house of Israel, that they should celebrate and pull in the blessings that are being poured forth out of the heavens and given unto the children of Israel, the house of Israel. So that's why you have to tie yourself into these days. They're spiritual days. They're ordained in heaven. If you look on verse 31 as well, it tells you it is engraved and ordained on the heavenly tablets. It's given to you as your blessings. You were just, and we were just, and our ancestors were just pulled away from these days. The knowledge was taken away. So when the blessings were being poured out, we didn't make ourselves available to it because we weren't celebrating and remembering these days. We were given other days. We were given January 1st, and we were given Easter and all these other days that were created by man. Nothing was given to us to tie us back to days that were engraved and ordained in the heavens. And that's why now these days are being brought back to our knowledge. So we need to tie ourselves to them. Let's read further in 31. And there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year from year to year. We have obviously been neglecting them. They were taken away from us. We did not know of them. Now the knowledge is coming back, and we need to now tie ourselves back to that knowledge. Let's look at the Passover. The Passover starts on the 14th day of the month Nisan, Aviv, that is the first month. So the 14th day of the first month, that's when the Passover begins. So let's find that date. So we'll go to the verses that were given previously, Exodus 13 verse 3 and Exodus 13 verse 4. And let's read through it. And Moses said unto the people, what people? The house of Israel. Remember this day. It's a very important day. He wants them to remember it. It's the day in which you came out of Egypt, America, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of the hands of the Lord, Thoth, brought you out of this place. There shall be no leavened bread be eaten. It's telling you now, you were brought out of this affliction that's in America, Egypt, and you were brought out by the hands of the Lord, Thoth. This is talking about in our modern time, things are to happen in our time. This happened in a previous time, but it's really for our time. This is going to happen in our time, where the children of Israel and then the house of Israel will be brought out of bondage and captivity by the hands of the Lord. And what date that will start? This day came you out in the month of Abib. So in the month of Abib, that's when you came out of your bondage. That's when you were pulled out of the bondage, out of Egypt, out of America. This is telling you that day is very special. It happened in the past on that day. It's going to happen in the present on that day where you'll be brought out. And then now you need to tie yourself into that day at this time. You are ahead of the schedule because you know about this day before anyone else does. When everyone else that is part of the house of Israel come into this knowledge, they'll pull themselves into the blessing, but it has to start from somewhere. You have this information, you go through it, and you decide whether you want to tie yourself into the blessings or you want to keep doing what you've been doing. Deuteronomy 16 verse 1, observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto the Lord Thoth, thy netta, for in the month of Abib, month of Nisan, the month of Aviv, Thoth the Lord, thy netta, brought you forth out of Egypt by night, into more prosperity, into their own land, into safer places where they don't have to worry about slavery, affliction, all kind of bondage, all kind of disadvantage, all kind of disrespect that they had to go through while they were in the land of Egypt, which is the code word for America. So this is going to happen. Again, you're ahead of the timetable in knowing this. So use this information to pull in the blessing. Why I'm telling you that? Because this Passover, it's not only for what's coming, it was for what passed. And the Passover blessing is for all generation of Israel, all generation of Jacob, all generation of Louis. It's the same person that I'm calling the three names with, but it's for the entire generation of all their lineage. That Passover blessing is there for that. Let's look at Jubilee 49. Let's see what the book of Jubilee has to say. It says, remember the commandment which the Lord commanded you concerning the Passover. It's very important. It's telling you to remember that you should observe it in its time. Every time that you know of this, you have to observe it. We didn't know before, but now you know. On the 14th of the first month, so we're going back to the first month again, the Nisan, the first month, the Abib, the first month, the Aviv, the first month, and it's on the 14th of that month. So going from this, for on the night there was the beginning of a feast, and there was the beginning of joy. So on that day, the joy begins. It lasts for a week in terms of the celebration, and it lasts for the full year in terms of your tying yourself into the blessing of the Passover. You were pulled away from it. We were pulled away from it. We did not have any knowledge of it. And that blessing was coming and going and passing us. And we were wondering every year, why can't we be blessed? Because we're missing the times of the blessing. We're pulling in January 1st as our new year, and we saw that there's no blessing coming from that. There was more bill. January was the dry month where you're broke from all that you have bought over their Christmas holiday. Now you're pulling yourself into the true new year where the blessings will be poured on you. You won't be late for this one because now you know it. If you don't want to tie yourself to it, then that is on you. I just have to give you the information, and then it's up to you from that point on. And the plague did not come upon them to destroy them or any life or any cattle or any men or any dog. So if you tie yourself to that energy, whatever plague that's coming during that time will not be attached to you. You will not be part of that destruction. And let's read in red. I'm now in verse 5. And there was a very great plague in Egypt, America, and there was no house in Egypt which there was no corpse and weeping and lamenting. So in Egypt, there's going to be a lot of weeping and wailing and crying and a lot of corpse. But where the children of Israel were, there's none of that because they tie themselves into that energy that's coming from the Lord Thoth. And they were not part of those plagues that came at that time. History is going to repeat itself. Same thing will occur. So let's read on in verse 6. And they prepared to depart from the yoke of Egypt and from the evil slavery. Who are they? The children of Israel. And then that's going to be translated to the house of Israel. The children of Israel are the dark-skinned, brown-skinned people living in America at this time. They are the children of Israel. And they are the ones who are under the yoke of Egypt. Egypt is America. Egypt is the code word for America. They're under that yoke. Yoke means bondage, affliction. They're under it right now. And from the evil slavery, well, you might say, no, they're not in slavery now. Yes, they are. They are in voluntary slavery. What is voluntary slavery? It's when you're working, but you're getting only enough for you to go back to work the next week. You're not getting anything over and above to pull you out of poverty, to pull you out of wants, to pull you out of need, to pull you out of the condition of having nothing. None of that is happening. So they're under a voluntary slavery. They were under involuntary slavery. That's when you're being forced to work without any pay. that changed into a voluntary slavery. And that's the slavery that they're about to be pulled out of, the evil of voluntary slavery. Let's read on in 7. And you, now it's the house of Israel, remember this day, all of the days of your life. This is something that you have to remember, not just now, all of your life, and observe it from year to year. Every year, this should be observed, all the days of your life, once per year on its day. So on the 14th of the first month, you have to observe the Passover day, all the days of your life, forever and ever. If you want to tie yourself into the blessing, if you want to see your beginning of joy, you got to tie yourself into that energy. Why am I telling you this? Let's read on. For it is an eternal decree. A decree is a law, a commandment. It's an eternal commandment and engraved upon the heavenly tablets. So it's engraved in heaven. Your blessing is there in heaven waiting for you. It's engraved that once you come in, observe this day, your blessings will be poured upon you. It's engraved heavenly. No man shall take that away from you, what's created in heaven. Tie yourself to it. Let's read on. That they might observe it. Who might observe it? The children of Israel shall observe it. And in every year, and it's once per year for all generation. The children of Israel have to tie themselves. Again, the ADOSs, the American descendants of slaves, and then that's going to trickle down to the other descendants of slaves in the Caribbean, Central America, South America. They're all going to tie themselves to this blessing, but it starts with the children of Israel. Let's read on some more. And there is no limit of days because it's ordained forever. So this is a blessing that's there forever for the children of Israel. The children of Israel knew this, but through their own stubbornness, their own disobedience, they moved themselves away from it. And then later on, the Greeks and the Roman came in and pulled it away from them entirely and passed laws that if they celebrate these days, the penalty for that is death. Both the Greeks and the Roman passed laws such as that. But it's your blessing, children of Israel, your blessing, house of Israel. Tie yourself into the Passover, which occurs the 14th of the first month. That's when you celebrate your Passover. Let's look at the information that I'm telling you and let's test it just to see if it's something that's made up. We're going to go back to the Greek philosophers and scholars and teachers that were sent to Egypt to gather the information from the Egyptians and to bring it back to the Greek Empire, back to Greece, for their own use of the Egyptian knowledge. One of the teachers that we'll look at is Anatolius. He was one of the person that was sent to Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt, to gain knowledge. And this is what he had to say, that Easter ought to be celebrated on the same day as the Jew Passover, the 14th of the Jewish lunar month, Nisan. Correlating what I just told you in the Bible. So the Greeks knew it. They knew this. It's no secret, no surprise. The Romans knew it as well because the Romans conquered the Greek and took the knowledge from the Greeks. So everyone knows it except the children of Israel, the house of Israel, because they were forced to not continue their practice and they were forced to not read any of their books of law and to gain any knowledge of their past. But the Greeks knew it. The 14th of the lunar month, Nisan, that's the Passover. They were trying to tie in their Easter holiday with that. But I'm going to leave the Easter to the Gregorians. But we'll concentrate on the days which are important to the house of Israel, the children of Israel, the 14th of the lunar month, Nisan. The Passover starts on March 27th, 2021, and it goes for 7 days until April 3rd, 2021. Let's proof this out. We go to Exodus 13, again, verse 6, and it says, 7 days, house of Israel, children of Israel, shall eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to the Lord. 7 days we're going to celebrate the Passover, and on the last day, the 7th day, shall be a feast to the Lord. That's how I determined the date of the Passover. It's going to last for 7 days. And we know it starts on the 14th day of the Nisan, and 7 days thereafter, that's the celebration day. And on the 7th day, that last day of celebration, it's a feast to the Lord. Let's confirm what we just read through Jubilees chapter 49. And in the 22nd verse, let's read, Moses commanded the children of Israel so that they shall keep the ordinance of the Passover. So he made a commandment to them. You have to follow the Passover. Then here's what it says further on. For 7 days they shall observe it. So this is again where the 7 days come from. During those 7 days to rejoice before the Lord. So that's where 7 days again is now confirmed that the feast of the Passover is for 7 days. We go back to this calendar to find out when the Passover starts and when it ends. So we know the first day of Nisan is on the 14th. We have established that from finding out the New Year day. Then now let's check the 14th day. If you go along the calendar, you'll see the 14 days is the 27th, Saturday, the 27th of March. The new year, the new day, Sunday, the 14th of March, and then another 13 days on top of that takes you to Saturday, March 27th. And if you check 7 days after that, it takes you to April 3rd. April 3rd is not on the calendar, but if you fill in the blanks after March 31st, you'll see that April 3rd is that date when it ends. So that's how you confirm the Passover date and the end of the Passover, March 27th through April 3rd. That is the date for the year 2021. Why am I moving away from our modern calendar, which is called the Gregorian calendar? The reason why it's called Gregorian is the Roman Pope Gregory decreed that a new calendar should be formed, and he formed his own calendar and then tried to compel all the Roman Catholic followers to use that calendar to mark when is their day, their weeks, their month, and their year. But it still didn't take away from the fact that the Egyptians had their lunar calendar and their solar calendar. In the Gregorian calendar, when it was first adopted, it had January and February as the last month. And the reason why I'm telling you this is that it's embedded in their history. They can't hide from it. And I'll take you through that. Let's consult one of the Roman historian. We had just gone through a Greek philosopher historian. Now we're going to look at a Roman historian, because remember, the Egyptian knowledge went into the hands of the Greeks, then into the hands of the Romans. And now, while in the hands of a Roman, his name is Livy. He wrote a Perioce, which is an ancient Rome history manual. That's where all the Roman history is put into that manual for their restoration, for their knowledge, for their passing information down through their lines and descendants. And this is what he said. The consular year changed from March to January 1st in 154 BC. So your new year is a change date. It came from March, in case you were having doubts. Then Why did they do that? To respond to a rebellion in Spain, Hispania. So you're practicing that new year, January 1st, based on rebellion in Spain. You have no biblical reason, no spiritual reason why you're practicing January 1st as your new year, none whatsoever. But it was given to you to match rebellions. If you want to continue following January 1st, by all means, I can only give you the data, the information as I was told to give to you. And then if you want to follow it, it's on you. But the January 1st date, it only started in 154 BC based on their own documentation. And it changed not for spiritual reasons, but for reasons of war. If you want to tie your energy into war, I don't see any point in that, but I would rather tie my energy into a spiritual day where it tells you my day, 14th of Nisan, 14th of March, is engraved in the tablets of heaven. That's the day I want to tie myself into so I can draw that energy that's emanating from the heavens coming down to me as a house of Israel member. Let's read on. Roman priests continued to treat January and February as the last month of the calendar year throughout the Republican period. They didn't put it at the beginning. It was the last month. January the 11th month, February the 12th month. That's how it was constructed. It was flipped around in the Gregorian calendar and given as January is the first month, February is the second month, but that wasn't the way it was. It was recently changed and given to you in that manner. And that's what I want to bring to your attention, that it's made up based on no biblical, no spiritual meaning, but based on the wrong reasons. Now, let me give you some more proof of this, because I want you to try to make sense of things that you've been handed down as a way to practice and way to do things, because we have to question these things to make sure that we're not following the wrong things. And part of doing that, I want to show you how to count in Latin and then do a similar count in English. So that's why I'm bringing this to you. To show now, if you look at the English numbering that's in the second column, the spelling, you'll see once we get to, I'm going to start you off at 5 all the way through 10. 5 in Latin, look at that word. 6 in Latin, look at that word. 7 in Latin, whoa, that word seems very familiar, doesn't it? Well, let's look at 8. 8 in Latin, whoa, that looks very familiar as well. 9 in Latin, whoa, that looks extremely familiar. And 10 in Latin, extremely, extremely familiar. What am I trying to show you here? That these months, September, October, November, December in Latin means 7, 8, 9, 10 months. 7th month, 8th month, 9 months, 10th month. December is the 10th month. It's buried in the name of the month, December. So December in their calendar is the 10th month. It was flipped into our calendar and became the 12th month, but it is the 10th. December, the word itself means 10. That's what it means. So whenever you're seeing December, it's saying 10th month. It's jumping out at us, but we just weren't checking the information that we got. But now it's our time where knowledge shall be running in abundance, and we'll find these things out. So the 10th month, December, is not the 12th month for us. It's for whoever want to follow the Gregorian calendar, which is misguiding them and leading them away from their spiritual blessing that's written in the tablets of heaven, waiting for them to find their way and attach themselves to it. Why am I saying this? Let's look some more. Do some more Latin. This is the Roman calendar before the conquest of Egypt. This is what they were using all the way up until they became the dominant force and started making their own rules that govern the world. Look at the months. Look at it. Look at July. Quintel, that was the name of the month before it got changed to July. July is commemorating Julius Caesar, so they changed the month from Quintilis to July. Same thing as August. The month before was Sextilis. They changed it to August to commemorate Emperor Augustus. So those 2 months changed from the numbering system they had to commemorate Julius Caesar for July, Augustus for August, but they left September, October, November in place. 7th month, 8th month, 9th month, 10th month. They only add a 10-month calendar. That's why their December is 10 months. That's what they were using until they got their hands on our Egyptian knowledge. They added 2 more months to meet a 360-day calendar. And then on top of it, they added the months below December, which is their way, the proper way to do it, and leave March and Nisan, Abib, Aviv, the same way. But then later on, they flipped January and February on top of March, Nisan. Let's look at what they did after. This is the structure of the Roman calendar, adapting itself to the Egyptian calendar to have close to 360 days because their calendar was off. They had a 304-day calendar. So if your calendar was off, you had no idea of how to count the stars and how to count the moon. And then now you're telling me to follow this calendar based on a calendar that you took from me. Makes no sense. I cannot follow calendars that have no spiritual essence to it. Cannot, because you're a spiritual being before you are a physical being. But this is what you're faced with right now, where January and February were put on top of your new year and became a new year that's tied to war, pulling you away from the blessing that should come to you in March on your correct new year. It's quite a bit that we have covered, and I want to make sure that you understand why we're covering this, because at the end of not the world, but the end of one rule, one cycle, one procession, meaning the procession of darkness, the cycle where the Egyptians, the Americans are ruling, it's going to change into a new cycle where the children of Israel, the house of Israel, will rule the entire world. So within that time, when that time is happening, wisdom and knowledge will flow. It will be in abundance. That's the reason why a lot of this information is popping up, because the energy, the Netta energy, is pouring forth information and knowledge on us. And this is one of the key things I want you to always remember, that wisdom is the principal thing. It's the main thing. If you're chasing other things, money, women, social media, popularity, you're chasing the wrong things. You're chasing things that's going to be of no value. Therefore, get wisdom. Got to get wisdom. And with all thy getting, get understanding. So knowledge leads to wisdom. Wisdom leads to understanding. You got to get knowledge and wisdom so you can understand things that are happening around you and things that happened already that you need to know now to tie yourself into the direction in which this new world is moving into. It's moving out of the hands of the wicked. It's going into different hands, hands of peace and love and harmony. That's where it's going. There's nothing that anyone can do to stop it. Another one I want you to know, because I'm telling you a lot of things. Some will hear it, some won't hear it. But all I'm asking you to do, listen to it, use your own inner judgment, your own intuition. Don't refuse the knowledge outright as nonsense. Don't do that. But just listen to your inner voice and let it guide you as to what is truth, what is not truth. I've done my best to show you the facts of what's out there that you now can go out and do your own search and find out your own truth. This is just to spark you so you can go out, do more research, and find out the truth for yourself. I've given you enough, and whatever I've given you, I've proven it, and I've always will prove anything that I tell you. You do the rest of the work. But hear instructions, be wise, be with wisdom, and refuse it not. That's what I want to impart on you. One other thing I want you to know before this is over, this is a verse that is very critical that you implement it as part of your day-to-day. You got to put it in motion, or you'll miss a lot of the things that are coming your way that you need to make yourself ready for. And this is 2 Timothy 2, verse 15. You got to get knowledge every day. You got to seek knowledge because you got to study to show yourself approved unto the word of the Most High. The Most High wants you to study so you can understand the Most High in spirit and in truth. Because if you're going to worship the Most High, you have to worship the Most High in spirit and truth. And you got to study. It's not going to drop in your lap. There are others who are going to come and give you information, such as myself, but now you have to take that, make it your own, do your additional search, your additional study, and make sure you approve of that information so the Most High can approve of you. A workman and workwoman need not be ashamed. You can't be ashamed of the work you're doing. You got to do your work. Others will say, yeah, it's nonsense you're talking. I don't believe that. You're out of your mind. You're crazy. All kind of different things. But you got to stand steadfast and know that your work came through study and it has been approved by the Most High, and you will not be ashamed no matter what people say. Once you tie yourself into the Most High, you lose your ego to begin with. That doesn't even flare up. People can say whatever. And the ending part of this, you should rightly divide the word of truth. So rightly meaning you got to do it righteously. You got to do it correctly, and you got to do it righteously. Break up the word of truth so you understand it. You got to break it down. And I'm going to show you in another message how to break down the word of truth. But for now, I want you to start your own journey in acquiring the word of truth and the knowledge by your own study, your own reading, acquiring that knowledge that's been put out there by the Most High for you to pick up at this time to pull yourselves out of conditions. I'm going to bring this one to an end. And as always, have a wonderful and pleasant day.